Hello, Midnights. We hope you enjoy our stories. Next up, the Twilight Zone of the Mind, a journey into sleepwalking and its unseen world. Let us know where you are listening from and don't forget to subscribe. For centuries, we have walked a path in the dark. A path between two worlds, the waking and the dreaming. Sometimes those two worlds collide and a person's body begins to move, while their mind remains shrouded in the deep, silent world of sleep. We call it sleepwalking, but the simple word doesn't capture the true, unsettling nature of the phenomenon. It's not the clumsy arms-out shuffle you see in old cartoons. It's far more complex, far more human, and in some cases, far more dangerous. To truly understand what happens to a person who sleepwalks, you have to look at the brain. Your brain is a vast city, and your conscious mind is its master, a sleepless mayor in the central tower, always overseeing the daily flow of traffic, the lights, the decisions. When you fall into a deep restorative sleep, the mayor leaves the tower, retires to a back room, and the city's complex operations quiet down for the night. The city's inhabitants are at rest. This is normal, healthy sleep. But a sleepwalking episode is like a catastrophic power surge. The mayor remains asleep, blissfully unaware in the back room. Yet, suddenly, the city's power grid flickers back to life. The traffic lights turn on, the street lights illuminate, and the vehicles, your body's functions, start moving again. The house is active, but there is no conscious pilot at the helm. Your body is navigating, your legs are moving, and your eyes are open and blank, like two unlit windows in an empty building. It is a profound, almost unsettling paradox. A person can walk, talk, eat, and in some rare cases even drive a car or commit violent acts, all while the conscious part of their mind is utterly absent, locked away in a deep slumber. And this has led to a rich, often terrifying, history of folklore and conspiracy. In the Middle Ages, with limited understanding of the human body, people looked to the heavens and the underworld for answers. A sleepwalker was not just a person, but a noctambuli, a night wanderer. They were seen as being under the influence of demons or possessed by malevolent spirits. The act of walking while asleep was proof that their soul had left their body, a dangerous journey from which it might not return. It was believed that calling a sleepwalker's name could cause their soul to fall, leading to their death. Of course, this was also a convenient way to explain away strange or unsettling events. Someone stole the church money? The devil made a sleepwalker do it. The local hermit was found far from his hut? He was possessed by a demon of the night. The moon, too, was a central figure in these narratives. The term lunatic itself comes from the Latin word luna, meaning moon, reflecting the historical belief that the moon's phases controlled human behavior. Sleepwalkers, in particular, were thought to be particularly susceptible to the full moon's eerie, supernatural pull. To this day, a full moon is often a lazy shorthand in movies and stories to explain bizarre behavior, a cultural vestige of a time when we looked to the skies for answers about the strange things that happened on Earth. But as the world moved into the Age of Enlightenment, the supernatural explanations slowly gave way to the scientific. The focus shifted from demonic influence to the mysterious workings of the human mind. The sleepwalker began to be seen as a figure of psychological, not spiritual, complexity. Sigmund Freud, for instance, theorized that sleepwalking was a manifestation of repressed desires or an unconscious attempt to revisit traumatic memories. While modern science has largely moved past these theories, they laid the groundwork for the modern medical and legal view of somnambulism. And it's in the legal system that the mystery of sleepwalking has taken its most dramatic and contentious form. The idea that a person could commit a crime while in a state of complete unawareness, an act of automatism, is a profound challenge to our legal and moral frameworks. The most famous case of all is that of Kenneth Parks. The legal drama of cases like Kenneth Parks's shines a spotlight on a fundamental question: what precisely is happening in the brain of a sleepwalker? The answer lies in the intricate choreography of our sleep cycles. Most of us imagine sleep as a simple binary state. You're either awake or you're not. But it's a far more complex, dynamic process, a journey through distinct stages. The journey begins in non-REM sleep, which is divided into 3 stages. The first 2 stages are light sleep, the kind where you can be easily startled awake. But it's in the third and final stage, what doctors call slow-wave sleep, that the brain enters its deepest, most restorative rest. This is the period of the night where your body's systems slow down, and your brain's electrical activity synchronizes into large, slow delta waves. This is the key. Sleepwalking is a disorder of incomplete arousal from this very deep, slow-wave sleep. It's a glitch in the transition, while your body is trying to move from the profound rest of slow wave sleep to the lighter stages of consciousness, something misfires. The brain doesn't awaken all at once. Instead, certain parts of the brain become active, while others remain soundly asleep. The motor cortex, the part of the brain that controls movement, receives the signal to get up and go. But the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for higher-level thinking, logic, and memory, stays offline. It's a disconnect that allows a sleepwalker to navigate their home, walk downstairs, or even perform routine actions without any conscious thought or memory of doing so. The body is in motion, but the mind is on pause. This is a crucial distinction, one that helps medical experts and legal teams alike. They can use a polysomnography, a comprehensive sleep study, to see if someone's brain activity during an alleged sleepwalking episode matches the pattern of these arousal disorders. The patient spends the night in a sleep lab, wired with sensors that monitor their brain waves, heart rate, breathing, and muscle movements. The data provides a digital fingerprint of their sleep patterns, often revealing a classic sleepwalking profile. Episodes that occur in the first few hours of the night during slow-wave sleep and are accompanied by the telltale brain activity of partial arousal. This scientific evidence can be powerful enough to sway a jury and convince them that the act was a medical event, not a criminal one. For most people, a sleepwalking episode is a one-off event, perhaps triggered by stress, a fever, or a late night. For others, it's a chronic condition with a strong genetic link. We now know that sleepwalking often runs in families, with studies showing that if both parents have a history of sleepwalking, their child has a 62% chance of also having it. This suggests a biological predisposition, a genetic wiring that makes some brains more prone to these arousals. The first step in treatment is often surprisingly simple: improving sleep hygiene. Doctors advise their patients to create a restful sleep environment, avoid caffeine and alcohol, and maintain a consistent sleep schedule. In many cases, these simple changes are enough to reduce the frequency of episodes. For children, a technique called scheduled awakenings can be effective, where a parent gently rouses the child from sleep just before their typical sleepwalking time, interrupting the cycle. But for adults with chronic or dangerous episodes, medication may be necessary to suppress the deep sleep stages where the episodes originate. The medical facts are clear. Sleepwalking is a neurological phenomenon, not a psychological one. But this clinical understanding often clashes with our deep-seated fears and assumptions about the human psyche, and nowhere is that conflict more apparent than in the court of law. The sleepwalking defense is not a new legal maneuver. Its roots stretch back over a century, but it was a sensational case in Toronto, Canada, in the late 1980s that brought it to the forefront of modern legal and public consciousness. The case of Kenneth Parks was so bizarre, so seemingly impossible that it became a landmark in the history of legal and medical discourse. Kenneth Parks was a 23-year-old man with a gambling addiction and a mountain of debt. He was married, had a young daughter, and worked at a car factory. His life was spiraling out of control, and he was under immense stress. One night, in May of 1987, he drove 23 kilometers from his home to his in-laws' house, broke in, and attacked both of them with a knife, killing his mother-in-law and seriously injuring his father-in-law. After the attack, he got back in his car and drove to a police station, where he turned himself in, claiming he had no memory of the events. His hands were bloody, and he had a number of cuts on them. He was confused, disoriented, and kept repeating, "I think I've killed some people. I don't know why." The prosecution's case was simple and compelling. Parks was a desperate man with a clear motive. The murder of his in-laws would ensure his family received an inheritance and could pay off his debts. His actions, they argued, were deliberate and calculated. But Parks' defense team presented a radical counter-argument. Kenneth Parks was asleep. They argued that his immense stress, sleep deprivation, and a family history of parasomnias had created a witch's brew that triggered a somnambulistic episode. The attack, they claimed, was an act of non-insane automatism, a physical action performed without conscious will. The trial became a battle of experts. Parks's lawyers brought in sleep specialists who testified that his actions were consistent with a disorder of arousal. They explained that his brain, in its confused, partially awake state, was acting on primitive, instinctual reactions, likely believing it was defending itself from a perceived threat, even though no threat existed. They pointed to the fact that his actions were disorganized and lacked the precision of a premeditated attack. The prosecution's experts argued that the complexity of his actions, driving, braking, and entering and using a weapon made it impossible to have been done while unconscious. But the jury was persuaded by the defense's argument. In a stunning verdict, Kenneth Parks was acquitted of all charges. The decision was a landmark, not just because a sleepwalking defense had succeeded in a murder trial, but because it forced the legal system to acknowledge a complex medical reality that flies in the face of our traditional notions of crime and punishment. The Parks case is not an anomaly. The sleepwalking defense has been used in numerous cases around the world, from the 19th century to the present day. In some cases, like the infamous murder of Christine de la Roche by her lover, the defense was less successful. In others, like the 2009 acquittal of Brian Thomas, who strangled his wife in a confused, sleepwalking state, the defense was successful. Each case forces us to ask the same profound questions. How can a body be held accountable for the actions of a mind that was not there? Where does responsibility begin and end? These cases expose the dark underbelly of sleepwalking, turning it from a simple quirk into a potential legal minefield, and they fuel the most sinister conspiracy of all, that sleepwalking is not a benign condition but a convenient and sinister cover for the darkest parts of the human psyche. The skepticism surrounding the Parks case and others like it isn't just a matter of legal or scientific debate. It's rooted in our most primal fears about ourselves and others. The idea that a person could harbor dark, violent impulses and unleash them in the dead of night is a terrifying thought. It's the central fear behind a common conspiracy, that sleepwalkers are not victims, but monsters in disguise. Let's address this fear directly. Criticism. The violence comes from a person's dark, repressed desires. They're acting out their true self when they're not held back by their conscious mind. This is a powerful, almost irresistible notion, but it is directly contradicted by decades of clinical research. Sleepwalking, as we have established, happens during the deepest, most non-dreaming stage of sleep. Dreams and the acting out of them happen in REM sleep, during which the body is naturally paralyzed. This is a key biological safeguard. The violent acts committed by sleepwalkers are not the result of a conscious or even subconscious desire. They are almost always a confused, reflexive response to an external stimulus. A family member trying to wake them, a loud noise, or a simple touch can trigger a primal, disoriented fight-or-flight response. Dr. Carlos Schenk, a leading expert on sleep disorders, has spent his career studying sleep-related violence. He has stated repeatedly that sleepwalking-related violence is a medical issue, not a psychological one. The person is not a criminal, they are sick. The violence is a biological short circuit, not a psychological confession. Criticism. The sleepwalking defense is a perfect cover-up. It's too easy to fake. Well, the truth is, the sleepwalking defense is one of the hardest legal arguments to prove. The burden of proof is incredibly high. Legal and medical experts are highly trained to spot a malingerer, someone faking a condition. They look for a verifiable history of parasomnias corroborated by family and friends. They can perform detailed sleep studies to look for the telltale brain patterns of an arousal disorder. They also look for any discernible motive for the crime. A person with a clear motive, like the defendant in the Parks case, is at a significant disadvantage. The fact that so few sleepwalking defenses have been successful in high-profile cases speaks to the rigor of the medical and legal scrutiny. The ongoing fascination with sleepwalking in film, literature, and media reveals our collective need to understand the dark and unknown parts of our existence. From the classic trope of the disoriented night wanderer to the sinister portrayals of sleep as a time of terror, we are constantly seeking to impose narrative and meaning on this baffling phenomenon. But the true story of sleepwalking is not one of ghosts or demons, but of a quiet battle within the human brain. It's a reminder that even when we are at our most vulnerable and unconscious, our bodies are a universe of complex and often surprising behaviors. The tales of people wandering in the night, whether driven by demons, a full moon, or a momentary biological glitch, continue to remind us of the vast, unexplored, and sometimes treacherous territory of the human mind at rest. There are several conspiracies and theories surrounding sleepwalking, ranging from ancient folklore to modern legal defense strategies. These theories often suggest that sleepwalking is not just a medical condition but a state, influenced by external forces or a manifestation of a person's hidden, darker nature. The insanity of sleep defense is a legal conspiracy that suggests sleepwalking is an easy and convenient cover-up for people who want to commit crimes without facing consequences. The theory posits that the automatism defense, the claim that a person's actions were involuntary, due to a sleep disorder is a legal loophole that allows murderers and other criminals to escape punishment. The Kenneth Parks case, the most famous modern example, is the case of Kenneth Parks, a man who, in 1987, drove 14 miles to his in-laws' home, attacked them with a knife, and then turned himself in, claiming he had no memory of the events. The jury acquitted him after his defense successfully argued he was in a state of non-insane automatism due to sleepwalking. This case fueled the conspiracy that the defense is a fabrication. In response, however, the legal and medical communities refute this idea. Proving the state of automatism is extremely difficult and requires extensive medical evidence, including sleep studies, polysomnography, and a documented history of parasomnias. The rarity of successful sleepwalking defenses highlights the high burden of proof required to convince a jury. Supernatural and demonic possession is a conspiracy, rooted in ancient and medieval folklore. Claims that sleepwalking is a form of demonic possession or spiritual influence. Ancient beliefs. In some cultures, sleepwalkers were believed to be in a state where their soul had left their body, making them vulnerable to malevolent spirits. The term noctambuli was used to describe those who walked with demons at night. The lunar connection. The word lunatic derives from the belief that the moon's phases, particularly a full moon, can cause madness and abnormal behavior, including sleepwalking. While this idea has been scientifically debunked, it remains a popular conspiracy in fiction and film, suggesting the moon's influence on the mind is an unseen truth. 3. The manifestation of a dark self is a psychological conspiracy that suggests that sleepwalking is not a benign neurological glitch, but rather a manifestation of a person's repressed, violent, or dark desires. According to this theory, the unconscious state of sleepwalking allows a person to act on impulses they would never consciously admit to having. Underlying fear, this idea taps into a universal fear that we all have a hidden, uncontrollable dark side. The conspiracy argues that the body, free from the conscious mind's moral restraints, acts out a person's true inner nature. In response, clinical research, however, directly contradicts this. Sleepwalking episodes occur during non-REM sleep, which is not the stage where dreaming happens. Therefore, a person cannot be acting out a repressed dream or desire. Violent acts committed while sleepwalking are rare and are almost always a disoriented, reflexive reaction to an external stimulus, not a premeditated act of violence, to the whispers and shadows of conspiracy and a public imagination that often struggles to accept a purely medical explanation for a phenomenon that feels so deeply unsettling. The scientific facts are clear, but our fears are not. And so, a different set of narratives emerges, each one a testament to our ongoing struggle to understand the darker edges of the human mind. There are 3 primary conspiracies that surround sleepwalking, each one offering a chilling alternative to the accepted science. The insanity of sleep defense. The ultimate legal loophole. This is perhaps the most widespread and practical conspiracy, particularly in the modern legal world. It's not about ghosts or demons, but about the very real fear that the justice system can be gamed. The conspiracy posits that sleepwalking isn't a medical event, but a convenient and easily faked alibi for a crime, especially a violent one. Proponents of this theory point to high-profile cases where the insanity of sleep defense was used successfully. The case of Kenneth Parks is the gold standard for this argument. To the public, the idea that a man could drive 14 miles, break into a home, murder his mother-in-law, and attempt to kill his father-in-law, all without conscious thought, seemed impossible. It defied logic and felt like a slap in the face to justice. Conspiracy suggests that lawyers and defendants exploit the public's lack of knowledge about sleep disorders to argue for automatism, the state of acting without conscious will, and thus escape criminal responsibility. The rebuttal to this is a powerful reality check. The medical and legal communities are well aware of the potential for this defense to be abused. Proving the state of automatism is not as simple as making a claim. It requires a verifiable long-term history of the disorder, a lack of any discernible motive for the crime, and most importantly, extensive medical evidence. This includes multiple polysomnography tests, which can detect the telltale brain patterns of a sleep arousal disorder. The fact is, the defense has only been successfully used in a handful of high-profile cases because the burden of proof is so incredibly high. It is a very risky legal strategy, and a skilled prosecutor can easily expose a fraudulent claim, demonic possession, and supernatural influence. This conspiracy is rooted in our deepest, most primal fear, the unknown. It argues that sleepwalkers are not in control of their bodies because an outside force has taken over. This view has been a common explanation for strange nocturnal behaviors for centuries. In medieval Europe, a sleepwalker was sometimes called a noctambuli, a term that implies they walked with demons at night. Their actions were seen as evidence of a pact with a malevolent spirit or a sign that their soul had left their body, making them a vulnerable vessel for otherworldly beings. The superstition held that if you called a sleepwalker's name, their soul would fall back into their body with a fatal thud. This fear was not confined to Europe. In many traditional cultures around the world, from ancient African tribes to certain Islamic traditions, sleepwalking is sometimes attributed to spiritual possession or the influence of a jinn, a supernatural entity. The treatment in these societies is not medical, but spiritual, involving prayer, exorcism, or traditional healing rituals. The evidence against this is the sheer progress of modern medicine. Scientific research, particularly in the field of neurology, has shown that sleepwalking is a biological phenomenon tied to specific brain activity and genetic predispositions. While the folkloric beliefs persist, they have been supplanted by a robust and verifiable body of clinical evidence that shows no spiritual component to the disorder, the manifestation of a dark self. This is the most psychologically unsettling conspiracy, one that strikes at the core of our identity. It suggests that sleepwalking is not a benign neurological glitch, but a terrifying glimpse into a person's true, repressed nature. This theory posits that the unconscious state of sleepwalking allows a person's darkest impulses and most violent desires to emerge, free from the moral and social constraints of their waking mind. This idea is the basis for countless horror movies and psychological thrillers, tapping into the universal fear that we all have a hidden, uncontrollable dark side. The sleepwalker, in this narrative, is not a victim of a medical disorder, but a monster in their own home, capable of unimaginable acts when their conscious mind is asleep. This narrative, however, is directly contradicted by the fundamental biology of sleep. Sleepwalking happens during a specific stage of sleep called non-REM sleep, which is not the same stage where we have vivid dreams. The stage of sleep where most active narrative dreaming occurs is REM sleep, a stage where the brain deliberately paralyzes the body's major muscles to prevent us from acting out our dreams. The violence associated with sleepwalking is not an expression of repressed rage, but almost always a disoriented, reflexive response to an external stimulus, a person trying to wake them, a sudden noise, or an unexpected touch. The actions are a confused biological short circuit, not a premeditated psychological confession. The person is acting as an automaton, not as a monster. While these conspiracies are a testament to the enduring mystery of the human mind, they stand in stark contrast to the medical reality. Sleepwalking is not a supernatural curse or a legal loophole, but a fascinating and complex neurological disorder. Understanding the facts is the first step toward dispelling the fear.